Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, we're going to be going through some of my beginner witchcraft book recommendations. Now this video has been about 2 years in the making. I know that in 2019 I said I was going to do this video, and then in 2020, and now it's 2021 and I finally got around to doing it. Hurrah! So for the past 4 weeks I have been basically non-stop reading beginner witchcraft content to compile a list of books that I personally really enjoy and that I feel give a good range of information for anyone out there that does want to start their witchcraft journey with books. It can be exceptionally overwhelming, especially when there's tens of thousands of books now available on witchcraft, to know which books are good and which ones are not so good. So hopefully today's video will help any of you out there that are looking for witchcraft book recommendations to find a book that suits you and your magical practice. Now before we get started, I do just want to say that these are simply my personal recommendations. These are the books that I really enjoyed and that I feel gives a good foundation of knowledge for beginner practitioners. That doesn't mean that everyone is going to like all of the books on this list. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to recommend these books on this list. These are books that I just personally really enjoyed, that I felt had a good range of information in them and that went in depth enough to give you a good understanding of the basic practices that go behind witchcraft. So before you purchase a book, please make sure that you do your research on the book itself, the reviews, the content of it, as well as the author. A lot of books within the magical community are published by practitioners of witchcraft, and so they will often include a lot of their own magical tradition within their book. And so if a book is by an author that follows a tradition or a religion that you aren't interested in following, that book might not be for you. But if it is something that you're interested in, you might find that that author and their other works could be really useful for you. Check the reviews online, see what other people have to say, make sure you look through the contents list, see if there's information in there that you think you would really like to learn about, and if you can, try to go through just a few pages of the book to see if you like the author's style of writing. Not every author and not every style of writing is going to be for every learner. And so there's lots of websites out there that do allow you to have a look through just a few pages of the book before purchasing it, which can give you a really good idea of whether or not the author's writing style is going to be suitable for you or not. So now that that is all out of the way, I've actually split this book list into 4 main categories: history of witchcraft, traditional witchcraft, ceremonial witchcraft, and modern witchcraft. Now the reason I've done this is because witchcraft in itself is such a large category. So many different traditions and practices fall under it that when someone asks for a beginner witchcraft book, there is no one correct answer. So many books could be really suitable for that person depending on what type of magic and what type of witchcraft they want to go on to practice and study for themselves. So I'm hoping that by splitting it into these 4 small categories, it will help you guys better pinpoint the type of witchcraft that you would like to study if you do have an idea, or it might give you just different topics to look into further to see which one you would rather practice for yourself. And finally, before we get into the book list, please remember that these are simply my recommendations. These are books that I personally enjoy the style of and that I thought were really, really useful for beginner practitioners. Now, my personal style of learning is typically more academic in nature, so some of these books are going to be a lot more intense than the kind of books you might find at Urban Outfitters or The Works. They might also be a little bit harder to find, but this doesn't mean that you can't study other books, that you can't practice witchcraft your own way from other sources. These are just the books that I really enjoy. If you can get hold of them, I do think they're well worth a read, but if you can't get hold of them and you have other beginner books that you can read them. There is no one steadfast rule for practicing witchcraft. There's no one way to do it, and there's no one book to learn from. So if you have material available to you that isn't these, then learn from that. Grow and learn and develop your magical practice with what you have available to you. If you can, or if you would like to get hold of some of these, then that is fantastic. All of the names of the books will be in the description box. But if you can't, don't worry about it. There are so many resources out there, from podcasts and YouTube videos to blog posts, forums, gatherings, covens. There's so many ways that you can gain information. If you can't get hold of these books, it definitely isn't going to end your magical practice. Not at all. Okay, enough said. Let's start with traditional witchcraft. Now, this is a topic that is growing increasingly as the years go on. When I first began practicing, there were very, very few books on the topic. They were mainly historical books. Now we're finding more and more practical guides to traditional witchcraft being written every single year. And 2 of my favorites made it onto this list. So the first one is The Crooked Path. This book was so good. I am starting with probably my favourite book that I've read this entire last month. It is so good. It actually got a 10 out of 10 from me, which is a really difficult feat. I do not very often give 10 out of 10s. This is actually the only 10 out of 10 on this entire list, and I loved it. So I read all of this in about 5 hours, which is really impressive for me because I am dyslexic. Reading is a little bit harder and I tend to be very slow when it comes to reading, but it's written in such a way that makes it very easy to read. It doesn't have a bunch of superfluous language, it isn't particularly wordy, it's really easy to understand, and it flows really, really well, which is good because a lot of witchcraft books are a little bit wordy, they're kind of jump all over the place, they're a little difficult to follow. This one was really, really good. It's also really accessible. It's a new book, it's still in print, it's available both online and in some bookshops, which is really good for those people who don't want to be trudging from vintage shop to vintage shop like I do sometimes. I am always on the hunt for a good witchcraft book, but because it's in print, it's super easy to find even if you are hiding your practice from others. You can get it from a lot of different places, which makes it so much easier to start your learning if traditional witchcraft is what you're after. So as I was reading it, I did note down some things that I liked, and this is actually the only list that doesn't have a dislike on it, so yeah, that should really tell you how much I enjoyed this book. It has the definition on traditional witchcraft from the perspective of the author. I think it's always important to remember that traditional witchcraft varies very much location to location, and so different people from different counties and different cultures are going to have different opinions on what traditional witchcraft is. And so it has the definition from this particular author. It discusses whether it's a religion, spirituality, or neither. It covers modern witch history. So we're not talking about the witch trials here. We're talking about the significant people that directly impacted traditional witchcraft as we see it today. So people such as Doreen Valiente, Cochrane, people like that, the people that were significant to the way it is seen and the way it is used today. It covers the spectrum of ethics, not simply good or bad, black or white. You know how much I hate it when those terms are used in books. This book covers it as a spectrum where different people are going to find themselves placed in different areas along that spectrum. It then covers some of the basic practices that I really heavily push, which are visualization, intention, and energy work, which I think are all really important for a beginner practitioner. It goes into different tools, the ones that you might want to use or make for yourself, and the ones that you don't necessarily need. It covers varying different techniques for spell work, including dolls, bags, ladders, and other such things, how to work with spirits safely, and it discusses familial spirits correctly. I even put 3 exclamation points after that, so you know I'm serious. It covers astral projection, journeying, and how to do it safely, as well as the natural world, fairy folk, and planetary grids, which a lot of you guys are asking me about. All in all, I came away from this book on traditional witchcraft wanting more. Like, I desperately wanted another volume, more books. I wanted to learn even more from this particular author because their writing style is so enjoyable. I didn't feel labored while I was reading it. I wasn't bored, I wasn't fed up, I wasn't counting pages till the next chapter like I am in some books. Instead, I just found it to be a really, really good guide to traditional witchcraft, and it is honestly probably one of my favourite books I've read this entire year so far, because it is just so well written. So the other book that I really enjoy for beginner traditional witchcraft is Besom, Stang, and Sword. Now this is a really, really popular book, and I can understand why. It's really well written, it's easy to follow, it does cover a slightly different form of traditional witchcraft than the Crooked Path does. This is a tradition that was specifically created by the authors of the book based on other traditional witchcraft traditions. And so I really enjoyed seeing the contrast between the two, the similarities. And so if you are interested in traditional witchcraft, maybe both of these books could be useful for you. But by themselves, they're both exceptionally useful and would definitely recommend. Now this one is not quite as highly recommended as the other one personally. That's mainly because for me, I resonate more with the tradition within the Crooked Path than I do within this book. But that's probably mainly because Besom, Stang, and Sword is based more in North American practice with North American plants than the Crooked Path was. And so for me, as a British person, I found that the Crooked Path fitted my personal style a little bit more, but this one might resonate with you even more depending on where you live. Now this one, once again, is a relatively modern book. It's accessible, though a little bit less accessible than The Crooked Path. I found that I could find The Crooked Path in most places online. Besom, Stang and Sword, I actually took about 2 or 3 weeks to try to find it because it was a little harder to find in the UK. I think it's really important to remember here that if you are in America, you might find these books easier or harder depending on the distributors in your particular area. For me, I found this book a little harder to find, but it is still in print, so it should be relatively easy compared to some of the older books that I do have on this list. So some of the things that I found good and not so good, although of course personal opinion. It's a tradition that follows no gods but many spirits, so it's largely a secular practice. It is not particularly ceremonial, instead it is more based in spirit work, a little bit more drawing on the shamanistic traditions that are found more in North America, so that's really where the difference lies a little bit. You find a lot more of the spirit work and the shamanism in this style of traditional witchcraft because it is more based in the traditions as is seen in North America versus the traditions that were seen in Europe. It covers witchcraft as a practice and not a religion, discusses what witchcraft is and what it isn't, as well as the presence of the devil in witchcraft, or the witch father. It covers animism and its place within witchcraft, as well as how to become a witch with study and dedication. A little bit of a negative here is that it is more focused on pre-existing witches that are interested in learning about traditional witchcraft. So it doesn't go quite as in-depth with the beginner information as The Crooked Path does. But if you are interested in getting into traditional witchcraft and you have other beginner resources as well, then it's going to be completely fine. You can definitely fill in the blanks. It isn't a deal breaker, but it is just a little more advanced than The Crooked Path is. Every single chapter has recommended reading, which I really like because it gives you an idea of where to take your learning. If you really enjoy a specific chapter on a specific topic, you can then find the recommended reading and go and read further into those topics, which is so useful. I find very few witchcraft books today actually do that. You mainly find this in the more academic witchcraft books, so I really thoroughly appreciate it. It's not just a bibliography at the very end, it's at the end of every single chapter, which is really good for pinpointing exactly what you want to learn more on. It then covers tools, what they're for, how to make them, altars as seen in the Blackthorn tradition, which is the tradition that is covered within the book. It discusses the elements and their altered use in the tradition, circle casting, laying a compass and crossroad laying techniques, as well as the differences between the three. It discusses the fact that magic isn't black or white, good or bad. It is, once again, a spectrum. It covers high and low magic, the differences between the two. Breaks down the processes of spellwork, including intention, will, action, manifestation, and mundane effort. Now, one negative for me is that it does cover different spells for different intentions. Typically, I don't generally like witchcraft books that do contain a lot of spell work, but it does cover a lot of good information in here that can really help you develop your practice further, which is always a win. It goes in depth into different divination techniques, briefly covers meditation, scrying is used, which is really nice to see. There's a whole chapter on herbalism and the discussion of baneful plants. Now, a positive and a negative is that it is very focused on the Blackwood tradition, which is the tradition of the authors of the book. So if you are interested in more traditional witchcraft generally and don't want to focus on one specific tradition, this book might not be ideal, but the Blackthorn tradition is based on lots and lots of other traditional witchcraft traditions, and so you can definitely gain a lot from it. Even if you don't want to follow the specific path written about, it can just be a really good book to read. It then covers the spirits of the land, necromancy and spirit communication, as well as ancestor offerings and types of ancestors. It also covers hedgecraft, trance work, astral projection, and it covers familial spirits correctly. There's a little cat emoji that you can't see, but it's there because I was very happy about this. And then it also includes the witches' sabbats, both historically and modern, along with moon phases and monthly moons, as is followed within the Blackthorn tradition. So honestly, I really enjoyed this book. Out of the two of them, I do typically prefer The Crooked Path, but that is entirely personal opinion. I think they're both such fantastic reads. So if you do want to go into traditional witchcraft, as in practical traditional witchcraft, these are fantastic fantastic books to read, and I would recommend both of them. I would say go into the reviews, go into the blurbs of each, see which ones sound like they will suit you more. So personally, I resonate more with The Crooked Path, but you might resonate more with Besom, Stang and Sword. So definitely do your research. Both though are really good books, and they're different enough, I think anyway, to be able to say that I would recommend both of them if you are interested in going more into traditional witchcraft, because it's a fascinating and very large topic. So next up, we have Ceremonial Magick. Now, some people would consider Ceremonial Magick a category in its own right, outside of witchcraft, but I have known a lot of people refer to higher or Ceremonial Magick within witchcraft, and a lot of people do incorporate it into their witchcraft tradition. So we're going to be adding it into this video for anyone that is interested in learning a little bit more. So the first book in this list is Mastering Witchcraft by Paul Huson. I guarantee I'm saying that wrong, but there we go, that's my attempt. So as you can see, this is a very old book. This is the one that I personally really enjoyed, but hope is not lost if you do want to find this book. You don't have to find a really old copy like I did, because I adore books and I love old books. There is actually now a company that prints out of print books. It's called backinprint.com, and this is the new copy of it that I got specifically for this video so that I could read it without worrying about tearing a page. But this is the new copy of it. As you can see, it's got a completely different cover, so if you would like to get it now, this is probably more than likely the one that you're going to be able to find. Now, I will say going into this book is incredibly dense. I think I've read all of this copy, this old one, and I got partway through this copy again, and my head hurt every chapter because there's a whole lot of information. It's really intense. I find it's a lot more difficult than, say, your average modern witchcraft book that gets churned out now. The books that are written about ceremonial magic are typically a lot more difficult to read. They're a lot more time consuming. It takes a lot more time to study and practice it, because ceremonial magic and ritual magic is often very ritualistic in nature. There's a lot of foundational understanding that goes behind every action that is done in ceremonial witchcraft and ceremonial magic in general, and so ultimately the texts that are written about it are going to be a lot more intense. So if you want something that's pretty easy to read, I'd say come to ceremonial magic after you've covered some of the foundational practices found in modern witchcraft, because that might help you along the way, because they are intense, I think, would be an understatement in some cases. So this book covers a huge amount of information. I mean a huge amount. I actually really enjoyed it as a good foundational practice, because despite it being quite a small book actually compared to a lot of books on ceremonial magic, it covers a lot of information in a lot of detail really quickly. Though you might want to advance onto bigger books, more complex books that goes into specific traditions that fall within ceremonial magic, if you would want to advance further. Now, the big downside of this is that it is a little harder to find. Although there is a company now that is selling them again, this book was out of print for a really long time, and so it's not going to be easily accessible to everyone out there, whereas the other book that I'm going to be talking about is a lot more accessible because it's always been in print, and I don't think it's ever come out of print, so there is that. Now, when it comes to this book, it is very large categories, which might be a bit much for some people, but it does cover introductions, first steps into ceremonial magic, some of the understanding of what it is, how it's done, as well as the preparations for spellwork and ritual. Ceremonial magic takes a lot of prep work before you get started. It isn't quite as much of a sit down and intuitively create a spell as traditional or modern witchcraft is. It's a lot more regimented. It goes over divination techniques and then different types of magic for different requirements. So you've got spells for lovers, counter magic and protection, as well as vengeance and attack. And then information about covens, how to form one, do you want one, do you need one, as well as planetary hours, and then a whole ginormous glossary of the terms that you might use that you might find really useful. Now, when it comes to ceremonial magic, as is to be expected, it goes into some really unusual techniques. Everything from scrying to creating your own tools, to specific runes, seals, and sigils, to planetary squares and chimeras. It covers familiars, it covers symbols, it covers different perfumes and powders and doll magic, and a lot, and I mean a lot, of different techniques for doing spells. you'll find that within this particular book there are so many different forms of spell work that go into it that it can be really good to learn a good range of ceremonial magic all in one go. But I will say with Mastering Witchcraft, it covers a huge range of topics. There's a lot of different spell techniques, ritual techniques, lots of different styles of magical practice that fall within ceremonial magic. But because it is quite a small book, it's not going to cover everything that you could possibly need. But if you are interested in just getting started and you prefer Paul Huson's writing like I do, it's a really, really enjoyable book. But I would say don't try to run before you can walk. Don't jump into the spell work and ritual. Don't go headfirst into everything that is written in here without doing even more study. Because although this is a really good starting place, I would not recommend this as being the one and only book on ceremonial magic that you have. I would recommend that you look up others as well, which is where the other one comes in. Do you remember when I said that the Mastering Witchcraft book was quite small when it comes to ceremonial magic? It's quite dainty. It's a little book. It's just a smidge of the tradition. I really meant it. The other book that I absolutely love that I would recommend for ceremonial magic is this bad boy. This is huge and it's really heavy. This monstrosity of a book is Modern Magic. Now, this is a fantastic book. It is written as a manual, a step-by-step progressive guide for ceremonial magic. Now, it was done this way because the author did a lot of courses on ceremonial magic. They taught a lot of people, and they used the step-by-step guides that they would use in their tutoring to create a step-by-step humongous textbook that is designed to be used as a step-by-step guide for literally mastering magic. It is a phenomenal book, though I will say, if you want an easy read, it certainly isn't that. I read the first chapter in about 2 hours, and by the end of it I had a migraine because it's really, really intense. It goes over a lot of different topics in a step-by-step guide. Now, this one is super useful because it is really readily available. This, I think, is actually a new print of it. This is actually a new edition. The book is really readily available. Most occult shops or most occult bookshops will carry this book. Most online bookshops will carry this as well because it's one of the most popular books on ceremonial magic ever created. It's still used to this day, and actually they do give quite high acclaim here. Revised and expanded, over 150,000 copies sold, 12 lessons in the high magical arts, and I will say it is exactly that. It is a one-stop shop for developing your magical skills, your magical understanding in ceremonial magic. Now, you will have likely noticed that for these two books, I haven't given you like a step-by-step breakdown of everything I liked and everything I disliked. And the reason I haven't done that is because ceremonial magic is such a huge topic. I would be here all night listing out everything that you could learn in these books, like it's that intense. But I have read both of them. I do really enjoy both of them. The language is a little superfluous sometimes. It's a bit much, it's a bit dense. So if you do struggle with that, it might not be the best book, but it is a really good book for covering the basic principles and foundations of ceremonial magic. It literally takes you step by step as you progress as a practitioner, and I think that's a really fantastic way of writing a book that I don't think is done very often now. Oftentimes now you will find books for beginners or books that are really in-depth. You'll rarely find a book that is both for beginners and in-depth in one go. This book is exactly that because they had this much space to play with. That's a lot. So these are the two that I really, really like for ceremonial magic. There are a lot more out there that are available, but I do really enjoy both of these. One is a lot more accessible than the other, but I do find that Paul Huson's writing is just a little bit more my style. I find it to be a little less sit down and listen and a little more here, learn with me, whereas I find Modern Magic to be a little bit more like a school experience, but that might be what you're after, in which case both are really, really good books. And this is really heavy, so I'm going to put it down now. So next up, we have Modern Magic. These are books that cover the traditions and the practices that are seen very readily today in the 21st century. Traditional witchcraft is based largely in the folk traditions of the cultures that someone is a part of. Ceremonial magic is based off teachings found in the Kabbalah, as well as traditions such as the Golden Dawn. Modern magic is a blend of folk traditions, ceremonial magic, and it's all been put together into a modern setting that people can practice today without all of these strange dresses and the cloaks and the Latin words, and it's typically more universal than traditional witchcraft is, which is often very dependent on your cultural location, as well as the type of plants and the items that are around you. So modern magic is typically what the books are written about today. Most books that are mass-produced on witchcraft are about modern magic and modern witchcraft. So I have 2 books in this category as well. So let's start with this one. This is Practical Solitary Magic. Now, straight up, there is one downside with this book, and that is it's a little bit older than the other book that I'm going to be talking about, which makes it somewhat harder to find. Though I will say if you can get hold of a copy, it is well worth the time and the effort. You can find some on eBay at the moment going secondhand. They're often available in charity shops. I don't know if it's in print anymore, but there are enough copies out there to make it relatively easy to find. I found this one really easy. Now, this one is a secondhand book, and I actually find that quite endearing. At the back, you can actually see where the previous owner filled in the quizzes, which I think is really nice. I like getting to see books like that, but not everyone does. You're likely going to find a secondhand copy. So if you don't like secondhand books, this one might not be for you, but I would thoroughly recommend it. It covers a lot of magical tradition that kind of bridges the traditional ceremonial with the modern world, which is actually pretty common in books of this time period. This was printed in the mid-1990s, and it definitely has that style to it. But that is the biggest downside of this book that I can actually find, is that it's really not that accessible unless you can find it secondhand, which I know there are a lot of copies floating around. So just some of the things I've noted down as I was reading this book is that it's solitary, exactly as its name describes. Practical solitary magic, which is great for a lot of people. I find a lot of people today don't want groups, they don't want covens. If they do, these things will often come later on in their magical practice, not at the very start. So this book is really good because it is solely about solitary magic. It's been written by a long-standing practitioner with a lot of relationships within the magical community. They've learned from a lot of very well-known people, and that makes it a really interesting mix because you're getting the information from these really reputable people within the community being drawn on in this particular author's writing because they have worked with them directly and they've studied them directly, which I think is a really wonderful thing to get that a lot of authors today simply don't have. A lot of the most well-known magical practitioners are gone, and that's really sad. But also it gives us the opportunity now to push forwards into developing new things. But this author in particular has access to the information from the people that came before, which makes it really good if you are interested in this kind of magical time period of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It does cover a lot of that in this book. Now, with the fact that it draws on the influence of the 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, it does contain some of the relic ethics from that time period. So you will find that there are certain aspects that very much draw on the Wiccan ideals of ethics. Now, that isn't necessarily for everyone, but you can definitely read past it. I did, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I couldn't put this book down. I enjoyed it that much. It discusses setting intentions, doing divination before spell work, thinking through spells thoroughly, how to do that, how to think of all of the possible outcomes. It gives book recommendations through the entire book, which is one of my favourite things. I love being able to be on a chapter and see all of the recommended reading. That is just like bliss to my soul. I love being able to do that because then if there's a particular bit that you like, you can look at where that information came from and then you can deep dive into that, and then you end up buying even more books and you can see where that led me. But it is really enjoyable just to be able to have access to the exact books that are recommended for further reading on that particular topic. I do really enjoy that. It covers deities, connections, offerings, and prayers. It shares a grounding technique, which I think is different to mine, but it is still a really useful technique. It covers various different versions of visualization techniques, which can be really good if you don't like my personal visualization technique. There's lots of other practices out there that you can do. So this one covers a good few different versions. Now, positive and negative is that it is based on ceremonial magic, and it does work with the elements in every single one of the practices and techniques that it talks about. So if elemental magic isn't necessarily for you, this one might not be good. But if you are interested in elemental magic, as I personally really enjoy, then this book could be for you if you are into elemental work as well as the beginner witchcraft aspect. It kind of blends it all together. It covers the different forms of practice, the different techniques, as well as how to put them into effect. Details information about each element. It also covers charging objects, cleansing objects and spaces, working with the elementals and offerings to them, magical timings such as Sabbats, days of the weeks, planetary hours are all covered in one handy chapter, which is nice. It discusses a very watered down form of ceremonial magic, so if you are interested in ceremonial magic but don't necessarily want to jump straight into it, this one almost bridges the gap between the two. It covers what I would refer to as ceremonial magic light. It's not quite as intense, but it definitely draws on the Golden Dawn style of magical practice. So if you are interested in kind of a combination of the two, then this could be a really good book. It then goes over circle casting as well as how to find teachers in the future if you would like to do that. Now there are some negatives when it comes to this book. Two main ones stand out to me. The first is that it does really push the idea of working with deity archetypes, and that of course is not going to be for everyone. Not everyone wants to work with deities. Now, everything that is discussed in this book can be done without working with deity archetypes. You simply read past it, but not everyone is going to want to read past it. So please take that into account before you get the book. And also, it does discuss astral projection in a really weird way that I have never heard astral projection being discussed as before. So that has kind of weirded me out a little bit. But generally, the book is really good, and it's good for anyone that really enjoys psychology. The book is written from a psychologist's perspective, and so it discusses techniques and practices that are applied actively in psychology today as part of magical tradition. It goes over affirmations and it goes over the mental work that goes behind successful change that can be applied both to your mundane life and your magical life, which is one of the reasons why it made it into this list. It isn't another one of those beginner books that talks about how you can get instant results and how you can find a lover in 30 seconds. Instead, it really focuses on self-growth, self-improvement, and being capable to better your own life before you start influencing other people's if you choose to do that. And I think it's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much is that it very much pushes the idea of self-development, self-progression, self-growth, learning, taking time, just being mindful. And I think a lot of beginner books today tend to miss out on that. You see a lot of beginner witchcraft books today that just contain spells to get someone to fall in love with you, but they don't contain any of the useful information that goes behind that. This covers the information that goes behind that, which I really like. So the second book for modern witchcraft is this one, Psychic Witch. I know that a lot of you have been recommending for me to read this, and I can understand why. This was such a good book. It's really, really well written. It's easy to read, it's easy to understand, and it is a modern book, which makes it really readily available for everyone out there. It's affordable, it's in print, you can get it both in person and online, which is super useful for everyone involved. Now at first, I was like, I don't believe the hype, but then I read it and I realised, damn, this is actually a really, really good book. Now, the main reason I love this book is that it is energy-based. Finally! Now, the way I teach magic here on YouTube is through an energy-based practice. It's the way that I personally was taught magic, and it's the way that I choose to teach other people. I have found a lot of books today refuse to acknowledge that energy is a part of any of it. I have read so many books that talk about casting circles and that talk about spell work, but at no point do they mention energy. At no point do they even talk about it. This book solely focuses on energy work, and I absolutely love it. And actually, to prove my point here, at the very top, in tiny writing here, I wrote, I was very bored when reading this. The information is largely as I know and teach, which is great for recommending to beginners, but makes it really boring to read for me. And that's really, really true. I find that if I'm reading a beginner book and I'm super invested in it, it's typically because it's a different style of magic than I personally have learned. And so for me, it's like new information, but it's old information with a new spin on it. This book, Psychic Witch, is exactly how I was taught witchcraft, and it's exactly how I teach other people witchcraft. So for me to read, it was incredibly boring, but for you guys, it's fantastic. So for me, this book was really tedious to read because it's exactly the way that I learned and teach witchcraft. But that means it's really good for any of you that enjoy the way I teach witchcraft, the way I talk about it, and have wanted a book that does talk about it in a similar way. This is amazing. Now, it very much pushes the idea that anyone can be a witch, anyone can be a psychic, which is, of course, really, really good. I've seen a lot of books that focus on the idea that only certain people that can be witches, that you have to have certain traits, and that is not true. Literally anyone can study and practice witchcraft. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is going to be super duper successful, but everyone has the ability to learn it and to practice it if they want to, and this really pushes that idea. The book itself is entirely adaptable, so it allows for you to add religions, add spirituality, add deities, take them out. It allows you to mix and match the things that make your practice unique instead of giving you a copy and pasted tradition that you just have to follow, which I thoroughly enjoy. The idea that you can add deities and religions into it that really suit you and your practice and your spiritual belief is really refreshing to me. It's not a book that says you have to believe this and you have to worship that. Instead, it gives you that flexibility. It's adaptable to your location, your religion, your tradition, and everything else that you might want to adapt it to. It covers meditation and mind calming, the importance and techniques, grounding, energy raising, energy drawing, centering, developing psychic abilities with exercises, visualization, hearing spirits. There's a whole chapter on cleansing. A whole chapter. Can you see why I like this book yet? It covers shadow selves, inner children, sacred spaces, circle casting as a bubble. Love it. It covers the elements, elementals, lesser banishing rite of the pentagram, as well as calling in the quarters, the spirit of place and celestial bodies, and then it does cover a few spells at the end that I personally wouldn't recommend for a beginner, but they're in there anyway if you do want to look over them and see how the spells are written and broken down and kind of draw information out of them. All in all, though, I think this book is really good, and anyone that's been on this channel for a while will know that when it comes to beginners, I will always recommend the basic principles, or what I consider to be the basic principles, which are meditation, centering, grounding, visualization, energy work, circle casting, and protections. And they're all in this book in different ways. So you can go through it and see which works best for you, do the exercises in it. Honestly, really enjoy it. I very rarely like modern books on witchcraft. I will often stick to the older books, the 1990s and earlier. So for me to like a book on modern magic that is written like a few years ago is a really unheard of thing for me. So if you are wanting one book that will really get you started on modern witchcraft, Psychic Witch is a really, really good read, and I would thoroughly recommend it. So next up, we have the history of witchcraft. Now, I get asked every single day for books on the history of witchcraft, and there's really only one that I enjoy. Now, I will say that when it comes to the history of witchcraft, that is a huge topic. Not one book is ever going to cover it because it entirely depends on where you are in the world. Witchcraft history books typically focus on Western Europe and North America. They rarely focus on anywhere else in the world. So if you would like more in-depth history, I would suggest looking at history books for your particular area. You'll often find folk tales and stories, mythology and traditions that are found within this folklore, and the historic books that are written about the local area that you can draw information from. There might also be specific books on your area when it comes to witchcraft history, but unfortunately most books are written from the Western Europe and North American history of witchcraft, which largely focuses on the witch trials as we have seen it through the last 400 years. But this book I do really, really like. This one is A New History of Witchcraft, Sorcerers, Heretics, and Pagans. Now, this was actually recommended to me by a long-time practitioner. and I do really enjoy it. It is a more academic perspective, so it's not so much a history of witchcraft written solely from a witchcraft perspective. It's an academic look at the history of witchcraft, and it's written by two people, one of which is a professor of history at the University of California, and the second is an author of several articles on witchcraft as well as a book on the subject. And so it kind of covers both bases. It covers the academic look at witchcraft history, and it also covers the witchcraft look at witchcraft history. So I like the balance of it. It also has a lot of illustrations in it. So if you are one of those people that likes learning from imagery, and it has lots of cool photos of artifacts that was found, it's a really interesting read. It covers a lot of different traditions from around the world, which I do really enjoy. And look, it's Gerald Gardner. Always pops up somewhere in one of these books. So I do like this one. It's a little harder to find, but I do really enjoy reading it. It's not so tedious and Christianized. Now, I do want to say here that there's nothing wrong with being Christian, not at all, but when you do look back through history, you will find that a lot of the traditions that were found within non-Christian people or the pre-Christian peoples was often rewritten and altered by the Christians to a Christian perspective. And so you'll find the history of witchcraft has actually been altered in the texts that were written during the time period because it was overwritten. This, because of the authors that go behind it, it's almost a little bit raw. It's not quite so smoothed over as you'll find in a lot of witchcraft history books, which I do really enjoy. And then lastly, we have an honourable mention. Now, I am going to be coming out with a full video on books that are more advanced. So they aren't necessarily beginner books, but they aren't very, very specific. Instead, they're that bridge between beginner and advanced. So I am going to be doing a video on that, but there is one book that I felt fell more into beginner books than more advanced books, and that is Sorcerer's Secrets by Jason Miller. Now, Jason Miller is a fantastic author. They have written so many books. I really enjoy their Protection Magic book, but this one I got for Christmas, and I am honestly amazed at how good this book is. Now, it's described as being a book to help pre-existing witches, magicians, sorcerers to manifest magic more successfully. So it's targeted towards people that have already started their magical journey that want to progress it further. But it contains so much good beginner information that I think it was well worth adding onto this list. It's almost beginner adjacent. It's designed for those people that maybe need to refresh their beginner information, but don't necessarily want to buy another beginner book. So it's almost that transition between very, very beginner to more advanced. Now, this book is more on the modern magic side, so it fits more into that category, but there are definitely aspects of ceremonial magic within it. So it's more of a modern ceremonial hybrid, I'm going to describe it as. But it is really accessible. It's a relatively modern book. You can find it both online and in person, which makes it really useful. And it's good to work alongside another beginner book that you maybe already have. If you already have a book that covers some of the most basic principles, this could be really good. It's also good if you have a book that maybe wasn't so good at describing the basic fundamentals. This reteaches it and then takes it further, which I do really enjoy. So some of the things I noticed while reading it is that it discusses the impact of mundane effort, how a lot of people will replace the mundane for magic and completely refuse to put the hard work in. This really pushes the idea that you need to be working on yourself, you need to be working on your own life, you need to be putting the effort in, as well as the energy when it comes to magic, which I really appreciate. It's not one of those books that will let you have an easy ride. It will make you do the hard work, which I think a lot of books need to do, but maybe don't. It covers meditation and energy work. It covers offerings, how to and why, the idea of gazes and seeing spirits, energy drawing and manipulation. It briefly covers many different divination techniques. It's not Wicca based, it's more ceremonial Golden Dawn style mixed with modern witchcraft, which is a really good blend if you do like that style. It also covers thought forms and fetches, which is a really interesting practice. Now, some of it is written in a little bit of an unusual way, so as you're reading it, it discusses breath work. And when I read it and reread it, the breathwork exercises are actually energy manipulation, but it's described as being breath. So much as the breath is life force, it considers breath to be the same as energy. So it's a little difficult to understand unless you have a little bit more of an understanding of magic, which is why it's kind of beginner magic adjacent. It's like a little step above. Now this book is split into 2 parts. That was all in part 1. Part 2 largely covers the different types of magic, how you use it and why. So the different intentions from love and money and protection, all of these things in their own little unique categories with their own different techniques and the methods of doing it, which I do really enjoy reading about. It gives you the idea of how these different intentions are put into place through the use of magic, which is why it's kind of a step above. It reteaches you the beginner stuff and then it takes it a step above, which I do really enjoy. It does have a focus on planetary work, which very much draws on the ceremonial magic, which is seen within the Golden Dawn style of magic. And it does cover things that I would say are not beginner friendly, such as the summoning of demons, which is why it's beginner adjacent. But all in all, it is a really, really good book. It covers a lot of beginner information. So if you do maybe already have a book on magic and you want to progress it further, if you have a book that you don't really think is that good and you want to progress it further, or if you just want to progress your magic further anyway and you want another book and another person to learn from, then Sorcerer's Secrets can be a really good read. It's also really accessible as well, though it is a little wordy, so be prepared. So those are just some of the beginner books that I have read that I would recommend to other people. Are all of these books perfect? No, not by any means. It's very difficult to find a book that perfectly fits exactly what every single person wants. And so in here, there should be a good range of books for different traditions, for different people, depending on what you want out of it. Now, my top 2 books out of this entire list are The Crooked Path and Psychic Witch, mainly because these 2 fit with my style of magical practice the most. So if you're wanting books that cover my personal style and the way I teach it, if you do enjoy what I do here on YouTube, The Crooked Path and Psychic Witch are the 2 that I find fit what I personally do and how I teach the best. But of course, my style isn't going to be for everyone. And so there might be books in here that you much prefer to Psychic Witch or The Crooked Path. But hopefully they give you a really good basis that you can maybe develop your practice on top of. And if you looked at the reviews of these and you find that you aren't particularly interested in them, if the contents don't really fill you with joy, if you don't like the style of the writing, these books might then direct you to other books by similar authors that you might like much better for beginner witchcraft. But I hope this was useful for you guys. This took me so long. I never want to read another beginner book ever again. I have spent every waking minute of the last month just reading beginner books. It's exhausting. Would not recommend it. A couple of beginner books is perfectly adequate, and then develop your practice. You don't need to read 1,000 beginner books. You really don't. I've read 20 in the past 4 weeks and my head hurts. My head still hurts. So I hope that you did find this useful. All of the books that I've spoken about today will be in the description box. Hopefully you can take your research from there and progress into a wonderful magical practitioner. Join us on your journey. What is wrong with me? Into witchcraft. So I do hope this was useful. If it was, feel free to give it a like. It really, really means so much to me. I will be coming out with other book recommendation lists in the future for more advanced practitioners, different topics, as well as non-book beginner witchcraft recommendations. So if you would like those, please let me know the categories that you would like me to do book reviews on or book lists for in the future. Let me know down in the comment section, along with any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas. They can all go down there. If you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I do try my best to post magical content every single week. If you would like to discuss magic more in depth, we have a Discord server that is down in the description box that you guys can join. And I want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You guys are absolutely amazing. Your names will be on the end screen in just a moment. So I hope that you guys are all staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day. I hope that you get some good witchy books from all of this. Let me know what witchy books you're currently reading down in the comment section, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Do I talk to myself profusely while filming videos? Of course I do. What else would I do with my spare time other than talk profusely to myself? I'm in a really strange mood today. Okay, focus. I can do this. I can stay focused for 40 minutes and then I can go and watch the next Spider-Man movie. Yes, okay, I can do this. I think. Hi, that's not right. What is wrong with me? I can do this. I can totally do this. I can do this. Okay. I can do this. You know what? I can do this. I've been doing this for 2 years. I can do it. Hey everyone. I've done this intro 15 times. Alright, okay. I'm 7 minutes in and I haven't even done anything yet. Oh. This and this. This and... Oh god, there's books everywhere. Ceremonial Magick Light. I can't believe I wrote that. I actually wrote that with a little trademarked in the corner. My ass is numb. My ass is numb. I've been sitting in the same spot for like 2 hours. My ass is so numb. Ah, right.